by two of the best strength coaches I know. Kathy Wagner is a master strength and conditioning coach in year 7 as the head strength and conditioning coach at the University of Texas at Arlington, where she primarily works with volleyball, softball, track and field. Prior to UTA, she was at the University of Wyoming, Ohio State, and UTEP. And her partner in today's presentation, Jami Clinton, is currently the head strength and conditioning coach at the University of Texas at Dallas, previously having served at the University of Memphis, Ole Miss, Alabama, and beginning her strength and conditioning career as an assistant at TCU in 1999. Clinton was inducted as a master strength and conditioning coach in 2014. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. Uh-oh, record. Knock him out. Thanks, Coach. Shay, you should go. Absolutely. On the left side. All right. Thanks, Coach Cole, for that. And thank you all for sticking around on Friday. When Becky asked me about this talk, she said, what are you going to name it? And I told her I was going to name it, Thanks for Sticking Around, You Can Do One More. And then she told me that wasn't appropriate, so then we had to go back to the drawing board. When Coach Reeves asked me to speak, I, of course, said yes. And he says, great, what are you going to talk about? And I went, I have no idea. And then I went to work for a couple of days and went, I know what I'm going to talk about. And I had 2 very challenging and frustrating days. And then I thought, you don't want to hear just my story for a whole hour, so I somehow convinced Jami to come join me to talk about all the frustrations and challenges that we face. You know, we're strength coaches, and so we think we're the expert, we're in charge of the weight room, we're in charge of these teams, so we're going to do what we think we should do that's in the best interest of these student athletes. But you forget there's a lot of hands that like to dabble in what we do. Sport coaches, athletic trainers, the student athletes themselves, and we have to always take that stuff into consideration. And so hopefully, after an hour of some fun, hopefully fun, anecdotal storytelling, we can give you a different perspective to maybe handle those situations a little better, or if nothing else, make you feel a little better. That's not just you that has these problems, and we can keep you out of the vice when everybody starts squeezing on you.
Well, I'm going to kind of just start at the very beginning. We're going to talk about sport coaches. And the very first thing that you need to do with a sport coach is sit down and meet with them. It may seem obvious, but let's be honest, as strength and conditioning coaches, our number one priorities aren't automatically, oh, let me go sit down and meet with someone. Usually we're worried about coaching. So the very first thing you have to do is set up that meeting. This is a great time to go through not only important dates, but expectations that these coaches have. All of them have them. Different training parameters they may try and influence you into. And so it's important that you sit down with them. But I think the biggest thing that needs to come out of this first meeting is a relationship. It's important that this is where you get a feel for that sport, because they're all different. That's where we're required to be chameleons, right? Anything from women's golf to football, they may have different rules, different expectations. So this is the time to really get to know the coach's expectations, their policies and procedures, and also get an idea for the personality of the team, because this is where you're gonna find out what role you get to play within this sport program.
Yeah, not to go off script, but I feel like I'm at a presidential debate right now. Just to point that out. If I stand like this, it might be a little better. No, so you come from those meetings and you might get some of their perspective, and maybe you're a person that really believes in 1 rep maxing. By God, we're going to train heavy and we're going to test it whatever week it may be, and you're talking to the coach and they casually mention that they're completely opposed to 1 rep max. Where I recommend when you go back to review your program, you don't say, by the way, we're going to 1 rep max at week 7. That's going to be your first frustration that you just did to yourself because you had previous knowledge. So you're going to have to listen to what they tell you, and you can still train heavy. Work down to some heavy doubles. Maybe if you trust that athlete a little bit, after 1, you say racket, and they get a heavy single. So you get what you want without telling the coach, we're 1 rep maxing, when you know they don't like that. Or maybe on the flip side, you meet with that coach, I won't name any sports, but they say, I like circuit training. And you like to lift, and you like to Olympic lift, which we all know doesn't usually go in circuit training. Okay, so then what you want to do is set up all your big stuff first, and then cluster or superset everything at the end. So if they were to come observe, they see nonstop movement and think you're circuit training because they don't know the difference. They just see people moving, but you get what you want. You get your big stuff first, and everything else is at the end. So they think that you're circuit training, and you know you're just training the athlete in the manner in which you want to train the athlete.
All right, so now you have all of this information from the coach. Now is when you step away. You kind of have an outline. You step away from the meeting, and that's when you put together your professional performance plan. Guess what comes next? A second meeting. It's important that you sit down with this coach, because this is the point where you become the teacher. You need to review with your coach what expectations you have, what regressions you're going to go through, progressions you're going to go through. Keep them focused on the big picture. You don't want them focused on, oh gosh, we were working hard this week, but not this week, I don't understand. It's really important that they kind of get where we're headed. And with that, it's very important that you understand that compromise with head coaches is definitely a victory, okay? Then there's several different times of year you want to go visit with these coaches. I know I'm telling y'all to meet all the time, just be prepared, all right? Definitely before off season, you've got to sit down and find out, okay, let's find some individual goals. All right, these coaches recruited all of these athletes. They have an idea of their potential at their sport. So it's important that you're able to communicate that and find out what their potential could be athletically. So sit down and find that. It's also, every year's different with every sport. You may be sitting with the softball coach, and the softball coach suddenly mentions that, oh, guess what? Every freshman I have coming in is a slapper. So now over 50% of your team are slappers. Or just the other way around, they may all be heavy hitters. You're going to train those two teams differently. Even though it may be the same coach, it's the same sport. But it's important to find those things out. And then you want to sit down with them, obviously, before the season. You want to be able to review the off season. Now, when you sit down with them before the season, you've got to go through your competitive schedule. I've made the mistake in the past of sitting there. I've been lucky enough to be in conferences where we had like the #1 team in the country we got to play every other week and those kind of things. So my thought process was, hey, this date, this Friday right here, we're playing the #1 team in the country. I'm going to be sure that we really deload this week. I want the athletes to feel fantastic. Well, then I go and sit with the coach before the season, and their mindset was, we're playing for second place. I want to push them that week because, not that we would tell an athlete this, but it's probably a loss anyways. I want to beat the other conference team. So those are the weeks that I want the athletes to feel good. Total different mindset than what I would have. That's why you have these meetings. So it's important to do that. Then I would say, obviously, after season, sit down, bring ideas, bring solutions. You want to be able to tell them, you know, hey, I think these things went really well. Hey, I would really like to work on this. I will give you one personal piece of advice. If you win a conference championship, be in their office the very next day. If you have a rough season, you might wait a week. But these meetings, like here's a good example. I once had a head coach. She was brand new to the university and came over to the weight room to meet with me. And walks into the weight room, and the very first thing out of her mouth was, where are all the Smith machines? My team is not squatting without a Smith machine. Anyone else have alarm bells going off in their head? Yeah. So immediately before I even sat down in my office, I knew that I had some work to do, and it kind of changed my perspective heading into that first meeting. I needed to do some education with this coach. I needed to find some background. Why does this coach feel this way? What has happened? Is it from a previous strength coach? Have they had injuries? Is that what they did in college and they don't know any better? You know, unfortunately, I'm going to wrap this story up, and the moral of the story is I spoke to the strength coaches from the school that they came from, and they said, yeah, she's not doing anything but Smith machine squats. So then my mindset again changes. Now I want to go back and what are the things that I can do to help these athletes? Can we deadlift? Can we do other alternative exercises that can really help them out? Because in the end, ladies and gentlemen, the sad part is that it's their team. The win-loss record goes under their name, not mine. So I've got to do the very best I can for the athlete, but also not beat my head against a cinder block wall, okay? So these meetings are very important for learning these things.
Yeah, and she kind of touched on it a little bit, but a lot of times we leave the meetings frustrated, especially when you're early in your career, because you feel like you've worked so hard to make it. You did the internships, you've traveled around the country with no money, you volunteered, you work all these hours, you finally get your first gig and you're like, finally, I've made it, I'm gonna do what I want, I'm the expert, and you go in there and the coach is fully micromanaged and hands-on. So you just instantly leave frustrated, but if you put yourself in that coach's shoes, you might find out why they don't give you the autonomy you think you need. Maybe they've been there for 20 years and have been very successful, and you're walking in at the age of 25 acting like you have all the solutions to how they're going to win. They haven't lost. So why are they going to change because you think that's what they should do because you just read the latest book or visited with somebody else? Okay? Maybe, and she mentioned it, maybe the previous strength coach, because we are very nomadic and replace each other, maybe there was an unfortunate situation where people were getting injured. So now they don't want to deal with strength coaches anymore because they had a bad experience. Maybe they were that college athlete that didn't have a strength coach and they were successful as the college athlete with no strength coach. They get their first head coaching job. That's for a whole nother presentation dealing with first-time head coaches. But they get their first head coaching job. They don't know any different. So you want to introduce them to strength and conditioning, so you bring them into an environment that's kind of intimidating if they don't know anything. There's heavy weights being picked up from the ground, overhead, around our face, on our backs. Most places, music are playing, blaring. My guys are laughing because it's not blaring in our weight room. Okay? Noise, people are yelling and screaming, people are missing lifts, unfortunately, at times. So they're intimidated. So for them to say, sure, take my team, that if they don't win, I get fired, put them in this scary, intimidating environment and do what you think needs to be done. So a lot of times, as opposed to getting so frustrated when the coach doesn't just hand you the keys, take a deep breath, okay, be patient, and educate, and slowly over time, it will get better, okay? Another fun thing with coaches is the four-letter word that we hear all the time in the weight room, okay? S-O-R-E, SOAR. I have yet to meet a coach that comes to me and says, Kath, man, every day, all day, I heard, I'm so sore, great job, okay? No coach likes to hear I'm sore. It doesn't matter what time of year. It's baffling to me. And then I'll have athletes, they'll stay all summer, and the first couple of weeks we're training, and of course they're sore, and then they've adapted, we don't get sore anymore, and life is good, and we're getting better. Then September comes around, and they pick up the bats and the balls, and they start running up and down basketball courts and hitting volleyballs, and they come in the weight room, God, Coach, I am sore today. And I go, well, of course you are. You changed our training. You started playing your sport. That's something we haven't been doing. No, you made me squat yesterday. So I've learned over all these years that it's virtually impossible to be sore from your sport, that only the weight room can make you sore. So to bypass that, you have got to forewarn coaches when their team may be sore, because they're not going to want to hear it. So if you know you have a period coming up that they may be sore, like in January, for a fall sport, okay, you have to tell the coach they might be sore, so when they go into individuals, the world doesn't come crashing down because they're a little bit sore. So if you go through and educate when they may be sore and keep the big picture in mind, it's okay to be sore right now because we're going to be strong later. Okay, Ray put something out on Twitter a while back, sore today, strong tomorrow. And I tell all of our teams that, and they laugh and say, no, sore today, sore tomorrow. Then I say, well, you're going to be strong on day 3. So you have to keep them informed so they know, so they're not just taken aback when everybody's complaining about being sore. Then maybe they can support you. Yeah, I heard you had a good day yesterday. That's okay. We're going to be better in the long run.
You know, I've done a couple of different things to help out with these coaches. One of the things, I had a coach in the past who really just couldn't understand, and it's not really their job to understand, you know, necessarily your progressions, your numbers, your percentages. So what I did for them is I just took a simple Microsoft Word calendar and I actually color coded it to where I use like light blue would be the lighter days, dark blue would be our really heavy or max out days, and everything in between. That way, when they were planning their practices or looking at this, they could go back and reflect on that, and they didn't have to know, oh yeah, Jami's hitting 80% for sets of 4. They don't have to know any of that. They just look at it and say, oh, okay, this is a heavy day or it's a light day. There's a potential that they may be sore. I had a coach actually very recently that it was a fall sport, and he wasn't a big fan of lifting anyways, soccer. And
deduct that one out.
And so we were only lifting twice a week as is, but we headed into our spring in season, which is vital to win losses in the fall. So we went through and we got to Tuesday, so day 2 of the first week of practice. And at the end of practice, I walked over and just talked to the coach and said, "How's it going?" And he said, "Jami, I don't think we're gonna be able to lift while we're practicing, because I mean, all these kids, they're sore, and so I let him talk, and I said, "Well, Coach, okay, I just have one question," just like Kathy said. I have one question. Let's take weightlifting out of the picture. When was the last time these athletes played soccer? Oh, November. Well, it's March. If you take weightlifting out of the picture, how do they feel at the end of day 2? Oh man, they're so tired and sore because they can't. And he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, "We'll revisit this next week." The great news is he never came back. So we got to continue lifting, but honestly, what he needed is he needed me as part of his staff to help him talk through that, to help him understand, help him focus on that big picture. So that's kind of the avenue that I took. I just wanted to be his assistant that is the expert in strength and conditioning to help talk him through that. Speaking of having to talk coaches through stuff, how many of you have had a coach who says, "Well, how could that have been a good workout? It was only 20 minutes. Or, "They've been in there an hour, but they're not sweating." We affectionately call that the sweat equity coach. All right, well, this is an education factor right here. This is why in that second meeting you go through those progressions and regressions. Maybe it's a deload week. Maybe you're just starting. Maybe you're in that 4-to-1 rest ratio that you have to have at the beginning of an off season when kids have taken 15 weeks off before they started conditioning. But let's be honest, what head coach wants to come out there and see a 4-to-1 rest ratio? Not many that I know, right? So educate them, keep them focused on the big picture, the end game where we want to finish, and then invite them back to those days when you get your sweat equity. Invite them to the max days. Invite them. They want to see that their athletes are working hard, and I love that because I want them invested because that makes our job easier.
Yeah, I wish education stopped with sweat consumption and schedules, but they also don't have a clue about numbers. They don't understand percentages, 5 sets of 5 at 80%. They don't know what that means. They don't know heavy, light. They don't know. And I know they don't know because I get asked all the time when I'm training women's sport, "Why don't they all bench 135? Is it really that heavy?" And I go, "Yeah, it is. She weighs 100 pounds. I had a defensive line coach when I was assisting with football. We were in a meeting, and honest to God, he said this. We're in the middle of the season. He said, "I don't want any of my guys squatting more than 225. And the guy that was in charge of football at the time goes, "Why?" And he goes, "I don't know. It just looks really heavy." Well, they all squatted 500 pounds, but he thought 2 plates looked heavy. So they don't have any understanding of standards. Or they think they do because they call their colleagues and so at this school, this is their standard for the shuttle. This is what all their kids bench, squat, clean. This is what they touch when they do their vertical jumps, but they don't know. But here's what coaches do know. Academics, with the APR rates that they have to keep up with now even to keep jobs, okay, and with getting these athletes into school, they understand test scores, they understand GPAs, okay? So if you relate everything to GPA, they understand. So when they come to me and say, "Why don't they all bench 135?" I go, "Why don't they all have a 4.0? And they go, "Well, that's impossible." And I say, "I know. It's also impossible for them all to bench 135. And I said, "You brought me a 2.0 athlete. I can't get them to a 4.0. So when they come in with the coaches, if they want to come question certain athletes, I tell them we've rated them. So after we've assessed them and we've met them, there's not a fancy spreadsheet or anything we use, but we do talk about it. We rate them according to a GPA. Okay? So if they just barely get into school and they're on academic probation and we just hope to keep them eligible, well, the equivalent to that in the weight room is the person that can't squat properly, can't do a push-up, surely can't run correctly. Okay? They get that 1.5 and we just barely got them into school. They're just barely in the weight room. But by God, they're going to help us win, so now we've got to keep them eligible. Okay? If they bring us that kid that can do everything, they're the 4.0. Our goal is over time we move them 1 letter grade, and that should be their goal in academics as well. So if they just got here on probation, they don't want to just keep them eligible. They want them to get a degree. So they're trying to get them to a 2.0, 2.5, maybe a 3.0 on a good day with the right classes, okay? And so the goal is the same. So if you relate back to academics and something that coaches understand, it helps you that everybody is different and they may just be a 2.0 athlete, so if we can get them to a 3.0, that's better. Now if they come in at a 4.0, we don't want them to drop. We got to keep them there. But if you can talk in terms they understand, it's a lot easier than trying to explain to them why 5x5 at 80 or 85 is a lot heavier or better than going 5x10 at 85 so they can all bench 135 because they just don't understand.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. I've actually already stolen it from her. Okay, last thing we're going to discuss here with sport coaches is weight room schedule. I'm sure none of y'all have weight room scheduling issues, but I definitely have that issue, okay? So this is the first thing is, again, you've got all these meetings, you're talking with them. We've got to help them understand that being on time is important, etc. I know I've had a team that the head coach honestly didn't even care about the start time of practice. Practice start time was 3 o'clock, but he was okay if they showed up at 3:10, 3:15.
Track.
Well, the problem with that is that they came to lift after practice, so they're finishing at different times. So they had that 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. time slot. And I think there's not many things more frustrating than having one team in the weight room at 3 different parts of their workout. You've got half of them warming up doing mobility stuff, half of them squatting, half of them are already to auxiliaries. When you're one person, that's extremely difficult to coach. So the thing is that when the head coach doesn't really care what time things start, it's really hard to convince a group of team that is accustomed to that, you have to be here at 5 p.m. or you're doing burpees. That's where our chameleon process comes in. So what I did was I took it and I called the coach and I just said, hey coach, you know, some of the guys are coming in a little bit late. I just want to remind you, you do have that 5 to 6 p.m. time slot, not because I'm trying to limit you, but because at 6 p.m. we have someone else coming. And remember, it's not these coaches' job to really care what other sports do, but they need to know what the time schedule is and what their weight room schedule is. So that's when you remind them of that, remind them how important it is that they're able to complete the whole workout in that time, and then also ask for their help. Hey coach, when they finish. I mean, I had guys that would show up with 7-Eleven cups. I'm like, oh, that's not on the way to the weight room. So, you know, if you see them after practice, be sure, hey, hustle over to the weight room. Get them out of the locker room. Get them to the weight room. And then you've got to sit down the athletes and have a very similar conversation. Hey, guys, I've got to kick you out at 6 o'clock because we have 50 baseball players come in at that point. So it's really important you're able to finish your entire workout. My workout's an hour long, so you guys really need to hustle and get over here and talk to them about how important it is to do that. So now that we've kind of finished with sport coaches, both of us have had coaches that are hands-off, fully trusting. But honestly, they're few and far between, especially when you're a new strength coach or really in a new job at year 20 can be the same way. The biggest thing is remember that it all takes time. Be patient and stay the course. Keep the coaches focused on the big picture, all right? Fight the fights that are worth winning. Don't be stubborn and just fight to fight, all right? Find common ground with your coaches and definitely build from there because compromise can be a win.
Okay, so when we did this presentation, we thought, you know, we really need to talk about athletic training because we all know how frustrating athletic training can be. And then we started setting it up and realized there were a lot of landmines in this athletic training position talk, and we both wanted to be employed when we got done. So what we did was we set it up, and I was going to start, but then we flipped a coin and I won. So now Jami gets to do athletic training.
Yes, I do. How come when a sport coach gives you a parameter to work within or honestly tells you how to do your job, you kind of shrug your shoulders and go, you know, they're the head coach. But yet if an athletic trainer looks at you and tries to make a suggestion or tell you how to do your job, you're angry and offended because they're trying to do your job. I think the funny thing about that is athletic training we probably have the most in common with. one of the hugest things is, A, they just want to be treated like the expert in their field. And B, they have everyone else voicing their opinion on how they should do their job. Does that sound familiar to anyone?
Yeah, I think athletic trainer is just like sport coaches. You have to meet. We're so willing to meet with a sport coach, but we don't want to go meet to the trainers because nobody wants to go in that room. But you have to, because I'm telling you, they're not going to come to you. So you need to meet with them, and you need to meet with them early. Because if you wait till something happens, you meet with them frustrated, and that doesn't ever work. Because now you're emotional, okay, and you just say things you shouldn't say, and then they come back at you. Now your egos are fighting, and you're not solving the problem. So you need to meet with them early. A lot of times there's physicals on Sunday, and you start workouts on Monday. So you've got to meet with them as soon as physicals are over. And they'll tell you they're busy, I got to go through and look at it all, I don't have time. Well, you got to find time because you have to know what you can do on Monday when they come work out. And then when you sit down and you go through the roster, they do a great job of telling you all the bony anatomy and what's wrong. So-and-so had an ACL a couple years ago. They have a history of ankle sprains. Great. But what they don't ever tell you is if they have sickle cell, if they're diabetic, if they have a heart condition. So make sure you ask those questions as well, because that's really important, especially now with all the conditioning that we're doing and all the crazy stuff that's happening. So make sure they tell you all medical history that's relevant as well, not just the bony formations and orthopedic side of things. Okay, once you've cleared the roster, now you got to talk about moving forward and how we're going to communicate. You can't just have one meeting and then be done. So going forward, are we communicating face-to-face? Are we calling each other? Are you texting me? Are we emailing me? Are you going to walk across the hall to me or me to you? What are we doing moving forward? You got to set that up, otherwise it's going to fall through the cracks. And what's going to set it up for you is the age of the people you're working with. If they're young, they're going to text you. If they're older, we're going to go face-to-face or talk on the phone. So that kind of works itself out. But you need to make sure they understand when they need to talk to you. Because a lot of times we have a game on Tuesday night, and then we lift Wednesday morning. Something happens in that game, you would like to think they're going to be there before weights on Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning. We're there half hour, hour before. They're not. You're warming up the team, they want to sprint in and talk to you about somebody. That's not the time and the place. So if they're not going to be there early, you need to respectfully ask that they give you information somehow, some way. And a lot of times they come back to me with, well, you were there. Didn't you see it happen? He went down at halftime. He didn't come back to the game. Surely you saw it. And I went, yeah, I saw it. But that doesn't mean I know the magnitude of it. I don't know, is he out for life? Like, can he do anything? I just saw him hobble off the court. I don't know what that means. So you have to make sure they communicate. 'Cause if they don't, guess who's doing it? The athlete. So now the athlete is speaking on their own behalf about how their ankle feels from last night's game. Well, that's all well and good if you get type 1 athlete that wants to push through everything, doesn't want to be held out of anything, or that athlete that finally has a chance to play, so they don't want to be held out because they're trying to make their name known. Or if you get type 2, the one that's soft as cotton, that as soon as that hamstring's kind of tight, they don't want to do anything. Okay? Either scenario is really good. So you need the athletic trainer to be the expert to tell you what's going on, so then you can decide to protect both of them, because the person that's going to run through the wall is going to get more injured and now be out. The person that's soft as cotton is going to continue to be soft and lazy and non-beneficial, but you still got to deal with them. So you might as well have them help you so you can keep them on track.
So now we've gone through kind of the hows, what's, whens, whys of communication. Let's delve into what information is actually beneficial to us. One of the most frustrating things for me is for an athletic trainer to walk up to me and say, athlete A cannot squat today, and walk off. That can be anything from a shoulder issue, they can't hold the bar on their back, to an ankle sprain where they have limited ankle mobility. These greatly affect the alternative exercise that I would choose and the rest of the workout. So it's important that in these meetings that you talk to, especially, I don't know if any of y'all in here from the Olympic side, but a lot of times we're kind of raising GA athletic trainers. They really don't know what we need and what will help us. So that's when you sit them down and say, hey, I need the biomechanical limitation. If you come to me and say, hey, such and such has an ankle sprain and they have limited ankle mobility today, you can talk through and make your expertise decision to find an alternative exercise. Whereas if they don't use that, you can't. It's their expertise to make those decisions what the biomechanical limitation is. So that's where you come, and when you're both doing your job correctly, you can go right side by side, and it's a great working relationship. Now, within athletic training and strength and conditioning, there are also some kind of shared lanes, okay? Especially nowadays. One of them is called assessing movement. Now, if you walk into a weight room and you see an athlete doing muscle activation and mobility work, I have to be honest, if I was an athletic trainer, I might think they're doing rehab. It looks very similar. So they may get offended that we're trying to do their job. Again, what have we been hammering on? Communication is the key. We've got to sit down with the athletic trainer and just explain to them, assessing movement is vital to what we do. If we don't assess movement every workout, every minute, and make corrections, we greatly increase the injury potential in the weight room, which of course is the last thing that any of us want in here. But movement assessment is fundamental to strength training progressions.
And I think when you meet with them, we all have an ego. Okay, you wouldn't be here if you didn't, and most people that are pretty good, you got a little bit of ego about yourself. You got to feel good about yourself and confident that you are the expert, but they have one too. And so a lot of times what happens is we forget that the purpose is the betterment of the student athlete, and our goal is to prove that they're wrong and I'm right. That can't be the goal. It doesn't matter who's wrong or who's right, it's about the athlete, and can the athlete return to play. So we got to get out of this fight of trying to prove that we know better, or I'm right and they're wrong, and I'm gonna prove it to them, and I'm gonna take over all this stuff. It's about the student athlete. Okay, one way to do that is to show them what we do. A lot of times we don't want to show them what we're doing. I don't know why. Okay, but when I say show them what you do, I don't mean the sets and reps, because they too don't know anything about sets and reps. I mean, tell them you're squatting on Monday. Tell them maybe Thursday's your big run day to have the water ready and the 15 inhalers they got to carry out and whatever else. Okay? Let them know as you go through your lifting plan, not to insult the intelligence, but you need to make sure they understand what all those exercises are. And I don't necessarily blame the athletic trainer for not knowing. I blame us for not having a standardized terminology. So they may work for me and it says supine pull-up. They may work for her, and it says horizontal pull-up. They may work for somebody else, and it says inverted row. It's all the same movement, but they don't know that. We don't have any standardized anything. Even back squat's different, depending on who you talk to. Everybody squats at a different height. Okay, so they don't know. So you need to make sure they understand. Some people use acronyms. GHR, they know what that is? They know it's the same thing as a glute ham? I don't know. So go through and ask them and make sure they know what the movements are. And while you're at it, if you have a GA doesn't know, maybe educate them on what the movement is and what it does. Because you can look at a movement. Sometimes they just witness a movement and think it's working something it's not. So it just looks kind of scary. Ooh, that would make my back hurt. No, it's an RDL. If done properly, it's not going to make your back hurt. But all they see is somebody bending over with a bar. Okay, so you have to do some education on that side as well. So then when somebody gets hurt, this old ankle sprain that we keep going back to, you can go to them and say, yes, he has an ankle sprain. Can he squat today? That's the problem right there. That's how we always ask the question. We're squatting today, can they squat? Well, now the athletic trainer feels that they're giving us permission. Ooh, I get to make the decision. Yes, they can. No, they can't. The answer is always no. Always no. Okay? So don't phrase the question that way. Because now we're setting it up for them to tell us yes or no, and it's always going to be no, especially if you're asking about squatting. Okay? So instead, when they come and say somebody has an ankle sprain, you say, oh, well, we're going to squat today, so they should be fine, to force them to say no. And they'll go, well, okay, so you have a limited range of motion? Is it swollen? Do we need to stay off of it? Do we need to lighten the weight? Change the exercise, because not all squats are the same. We know that. A back squat versus a front squat is completely different on that ankle. So if you set it up as dialogue and not asking for permission, because they perceive it as asking for permission, and why wouldn't they? I asked, can they squat today? How else do you perceive that? You know, yes or no? Well, that's not what we want. We want to have dialogue on how can they squat today, not the ultimatum. So change how you ask the question and you might leave a little less frustrated.
Frustrations. We're going back to the weight room schedule. I think that, it's important to sit down. First of all, always share your weight room schedule with your athletic training staff. But a lot of athletic trainers might be surprised to find out that we don't even have 100% control over our own schedule. The head coach almost always has a say. They've got to balance classes, tutors, study halls, all those kind of things. Not to mention, they may be the athletic trainer for baseball only. They work out at the baseball field, who no one uses except our baseball team. Also, they have an athletic training room at the field, so they have their very own training room, whereas I may be the head coach for baseball and for other sports that I need to see that day. And I work out of a shared facility that has every sport on campus working out of it. So we have a lot of different things that we have going on. So that locks us into some time frames that we may not absolutely love. For instance, I don't think 6 a.m. is an ideal workout time. I don't love being up at that time. I don't love having athletes who I know went to bed at 1 or 2 up at that time. However, our hands are kind of tied. Speaking of that 6 a.m. workout, going back to our communication, don't forget about your athletic trainer when the schedule changes, because it always changes. How many of y'all have gotten the text message on a Sunday that said, oh, we played great this weekend, I'm going to give them Monday morning off, or oh, they look exhausted and we lost, I'm canceling the 6 a.m. Monday workout. Even though the athletic trainer is probably sitting 2 seats behind them on the bus, that does not mean that the athletic trainer got the message. So there's no worse feeling than getting that text from your athletic trainer at 5:45 saying, where is everyone? When it was canceled and you didn't let them know. Is it necessarily our job? No, but again, we're looking coordinated effort here. We want to come together and work together for the betterment of the athlete. So that's one way. Anytime those scheduling changes happen, just make it habit. Just like you would text the GA that's helping you, text the athletic trainer so that they know the schedule change has happened.
Now, on the flip side of that, trainers can be very helpful to us, because there's been a number of times the coach on the bus cancels weights, but then doesn't tell me. The athletic trainer tells me, did you know they just canceled weights in the morning? No, I didn't. So then I text the coach to confirm, and they say, yes. So you want to make sure you have a healthy relationship with the training room so they share that information with you. Otherwise, they're going to be too pissed at you and go, that's all right, she'll figure it out when she gets there. So make sure you have a healthy relationship with them so y'all can share information. The other thing is they can share information about the individual athlete. The training room is kind of like the soft place to land for a lot of athletes, and trainers are like their counselor, where the weight room's not always that way. And so the athlete will go in there and discuss their life. So maybe somebody's got something going on in life. Somebody just passed away, they got a bad breakup, that 4.0 student made a B on their test, something that's just life altering in their mind and their perspective. Well, the trainer usually knows that. So if you have a good relationship and open lines of communication, they can share that with you, so that when they come in and look a little down, if it was something as tragic as a death in the family, you don't instantly go up in front of everybody, hey, how you doing today? Because you look a little down, and then start the flood of emotion on the poor kid. Okay, you already had that insider information. You can talk to them at the end if you feel compelled to say something to them about what you heard from the training room. Okay, so they can help you. They can also help you if you're small staff like we are. Okay, we're not at every practice. We don't travel. We go to as many home games as possible, but a lot of times softball, baseball, and track are all going at the same time. Clearly you can't be at 3 places at once, but the trainers all just have one team. So they're at every practice, they're at every game. Okay, so maybe you have that sport that comes and lifts after practice. Okay, and then the coach goes all rogue today and is all crazy, and they've been on the line for the last 30 minutes running, and you were getting ready to lift them heavy. If you have a good relationship, the trainer can text you and go, oh, good Lord, coach is pissed today. And you can do what you want with that information. Doesn't mean you have to change your plans, but at least you have it, so if you want to, you can. Okay? Or our volleyball coach, she gives me a calendar of all their practices and then tells me what they're doing at practice. It's very helpful. Okay, so on Tuesday morning, they practice and we'll lift in the afternoon in the off season. Well, in the morning, it's a pass and serve. So I take that as they're not jumping, very few swings, pretty low impact. Well, maybe, and this has happened, On Wednesday, they practice as a team in the afternoon. Well, all of a sudden, something came up that the kids have to go attend, so she changed Tuesday morning to a 2-hour scrimmage, which is completely different than what my calendar says, which may change what I want to do that afternoon. But if the trainer will let me know that, I've got time to adjust if I see fit. Okay, so don't close the door, grow the relationship so you can have this back and forth for the betterment of the student athlete, because that's what it's about.
Well, let's talk a little bit about said student athlete. I'll just say that in my career time, how times have changed. We are now in a generation of instant gratitude. Honestly, I feel like sometimes just when they walk in the door, I should clap my hands and say, "Great job, you made it to the weight room on time."
And then put it on Twitter.
Oh yeah, don't forget about that, right? The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's reality. This is where we are, and it's time that we face it, okay? Speaking of social media, why not take advantage? What's wrong with going through maxing and maybe an athlete's about to hit a PR and he turns around and says, "Hey coach, do you care if my buddy over here videos this so I can post it on whatever?" Is that really such a bad thing? I'm not saying I want them taking selfies, me and my workout partner today, all right? But is it a bad thing if A, it gets them excited about lifting weights, and B, the people who see it become excited about lifting weights? Isn't that all of our goals anyways? We want to motivate them. In order to motivate them, we've got to get to know them. We've got to spend some time really learning where are they from, what do their parents do, what's their major, you know, and then on the other side, we've got to let them know that we're human too. Now, I'm not saying deeply personal stuff you'd share with a friend, but there's nothing wrong with letting them know that we are not a militant robot in the weight room to inflict torture, all right? The second thing third thing I like to kind of help them with is there's one thing that I actually tell a lot of recruits, but I also tell my athletes, is that there are not many times in your life when you have a group of people around you that their basically only job is to make you better. I have a job as a strength and conditioning coach, not to balance a budget, not to hang out with the sport coaches and athletic trainers, but my job is to take athlete A and make them better. So every decision I make in all of my workouts, etc., is focused on that. And that is to kind of help them understand, I know you think this is a crazy exercise, but this is going to make you better on your field, on your court, on the pitch, wherever it is. So we have to explain that. I mean, even the situation we're all in. I mean, my boss here, he's got to meet with the soccer coach. He's got to meet with the budget guy. He may have an event across campus with the president. Oh yeah, then in all his spare time, he's trying to help me be better at my job. So it really is a unique situation, and I think we need to let our athletes know that they need to take advantage.
Yeah, when I first started, I thought it was pretty easy to motivate them. I wasn't that much older than they are. But now that I've gotten older, and they haven't, it sometimes gets a little more difficult. They're still 18, 19, 20, and I'm not much older than that, but I'm clearly a little bit older than they are. And so it's gotten a little bit harder, and I think they lose sight of the idea that we're more than just the person in the weight room. You know, if you're not in a situation where you can be at everything, the only time they see you is in the weight room. So they think all you care about are their weight room numbers. You know, did my squat go up? Did my jump go up? Did my run get faster? That's all they think we care about, and that's not the truth at all. We care about, obviously we want to have success in the weight room, but we want them to have success in their sport. But they may not understand that because we're never at their sport. So they associate us with the weight room. So you want them to associate you with the weight room, of course, but also with their sport. And the only way to do that is to be a fan. Be a fan of them as an individual, then be a fan of their sport, okay? Go to games if you can, go to practices, learn their sport. There's gonna come a time when you take a job and they give you a sport you know nothing about, okay? Especially if you change regions of the country, okay? I went to Ohio State, there's lacrosse. I didn't know anything about lacrosse. There's no lacrosse down here in Texas, so there wasn't, you know, when I was growing up. I don't think there is now, I don't know, okay? But when I started at UTEP, believe it or not, that sport for me was soccer. Soccer is very relative, and everybody plays soccer unless you grow up in Texas and your dad's a head football coach, okay? I wasn't even allowed to say the word soccer in my house. I'm not gonna tell you what he called it, Okay, so then I go to UTEP and they say, you're in charge of soccer. And I went, great. I got a job. I'm going to train soccer. My boss let me do whatever I want to do. I know nothing. I mean nothing about soccer. So I go to the first game. 90 minutes later, it's 0-0. I was like, this is the most boring thing I've ever witnessed in my life. But every once in a while, I noticed the crowd would get excited and cheer, and so I'd try to find out what the hell we're cheering for. Nothing is happening, and I'm like, this is killing me. And so when they came to lift on Monday, we tied 0-0. They thought that was good. I still don't understand that. Somebody will explain it to me later. And so at the end of the lift, I said, okay, I have to ask y'all a question. So we started the tradition of every Monday after the lift, we had 5 minutes of stupid Coach Crow questions. And so I made them sit down, and I got to ask what they deemed as stupid questions about the sport of soccer that I deemed very educational. That they got to then teach me. So they got to make fun of me. I got to make fun of myself, whatever. But they got to see me as a human, which I think is important. And so I would ask them what they thought were stupid questions, like why does the goalie sometimes kick it and sometimes pick it up? What difference does it make? And they go, well, Coach, there's a rule. And I said, oh, well, what's the rule? And so they told me the rule. And I said, oh, okay. And then they had explained to me that there's no timeouts in soccer. I didn't know that. Why would you know that if you don't play soccer? And so I would ask these questions. And so I went to Ohio State. I did the same thing with softball, another very common sport that was not common in Texas when I was growing up. I didn't play high school softball. It wasn't around. Okay? My college didn't have softball. I didn't know anything about it. And so I called them up, and we did the same thing. Stupid Coach Crow questions part 2, this time softball. Okay? And so I'd sit them down, and I did stump them. Every once in a while I try to stump them. I asked one of them, when you intentionally walk somebody, why can't we just play catch? I said, if you throw overhand to illegal pitch, it automatically moves them. Why do we got to do it 4 times? Just throw one and call it good. And they didn't understand. They didn't know. And so I told them they had to find out, and then they came back with, well, if illegal pitch moves everybody and usually walks somebody on the bases, you don't want to move everybody. And so they got a little education too. But if you don't know about the sport, learn about the sport. Let them teach you about the sport. Don't just go to Google. Don't just call your friends. Let them see. Then they realize that you're a fan and that you care more about their sport and their success in their sport. It's not just about weight room numbers.
We just kind of want to wrap up here with kind of some lessons that we've learned in our collective 32 years of experience as strength and conditioning coaches. One of the biggest things that I think would really help out our career field, strength and conditioning, is helping people to understand what the role of a strength coach is. I mean, honestly, we have people, administration, sport coaches, even athletes who do not understand what we do. First thing I do to kind of describe that is, okay, we're titled a strength coach. Basketball coach is titled a basketball coach. And yet, I've never heard anyone refer to the basketball coach as the basketball gym monitor. Anyone? No, I don't think so. They all understand that they recruit, that they plan practices, that they evaluate talent, that they do many things beyond standing on the basketball court and coaching. However, I think we have a lot of sport coaches, athletic trainers, even student athletes, who think we are not much more than a weight room monitor. I honestly think they think we walk in and cross our arms in the morning and go, I think today we'll squat. I'm thinking 3 sets of 8. How does that sound? So it is our job to be the professional and be the expert in the field. It is our job to educate them that we spend a lot of time planning, programming, researching, evaluating talent and ability. It's very important to help people understand that part of our role. The second thing I think people don't really get is that we touch every part of the athletic circle. Not only do we deal with the head coaches and the athletes, athletic training, sports psychology, sports nutrition, even the academic advisors, we virtually work with everyone involved in the athlete's life. So them understanding that, how does that not help make us more valuable to an athletic department? And then thirdly, we see these athletes more than anyone else does. Y'all all know that. We spend more time with these athletes really than probably the head coach that recruited them. So if I'm a head coach and I learn that about my strength and conditioning coach, how does that not increase the value of the role they play within my sport program? So just educate people. And the last thing I'd just like to share is that I think it's very important that you understand we're in a people business. relationships are very, very important. And honestly, I don't think you can be successful in this business without being able to maintain relationships. So work hard at them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when I started, I didn't know anything. I mean, I thought I did, but clearly I didn't when I first started. And you get so consumed with numbers, and you get so consumed with, are my numbers going up? Are we getting stronger? Are we getting faster? And when you take a step back, it's not about the number at all, and it's not about you. It's about the student athlete. And a lot of times we lose sight on that because we all post all our numbers and talk about it and brag about it. But at the end of the day, it's about the student athlete and nothing else. Okay, so always keep that in mind when you're having these frustrations. Is it worth this frustration I'm causing myself if it's not going to have an impact at all on this person? And if it's not, then don't have the frustration. Okay, when I started, I was very bullheaded. I was convinced that I was the expert and I knew, and by God, we're going to do it this way and this way only. And all that did was make me very, very frustrated. I can only imagine what my bosses thought at the time, okay, especially now that I'm a boss. Okay, so you have to stay open-minded because the ultimatum is change. And that's either change in that sport's not coming in the weight room anymore, or change in that you're not going to be their strength coach anymore. And you don't want either one of those to happen. So stay open-minded and find a different way. There are so many ways to get it done. So don't landlock yourself and railroad yourself into one way and one way only. Because when you change jobs, you may not have that equipment, you may not have that time, you may not have that staff, you may not have that caliber athlete. Okay, I've had some really good and some really bad. Okay, so you have to change and you have to adapt and be moldable. Okay, so just when you think you have all the answers, take a step back and realize you don't have very many of them. Okay, the other thing is with relationships is you need to meet with your coaches. Okay, in an ideal world, you should meet like daily. I don't mean meet, sit down, pad and paper. I mean at minimum walk by, hey coach, how you doing? That counts in my opinion as a meeting for that day. Now obviously that's virtually impossible if you have multiple groups or you're spread out all over campus. So don't let a week go by without meeting you going and finding the coach. Because when I started, I thought, I'm in this weight room, I'm the strength coach. They're the volleyball coach, basketball coach, whatever they may be. And if I need something from that sport coach, I'm going to go to the sport coach. So in return, if they need something from me or have questions, they're going to come to me. So I'm just going to sit here. Well, then you realize that the only time the sport coach comes to you is when they're pissed. They don't ever come to you to go, hey, good job. They come to you because they're concerned about something. So to avoid that, you always need to go to them. Okay? So I say go to them, be proactive so you don't have to be reactive. If you wait till they come to you, you're reactive because now your emotions are in play. You don't want your emotions to be in play. Go to them and be proactive. Coach, we always lift on Wednesday because we play on Tuesday, but I notice in 4 weeks we're going to play on Wednesday instead. What do you want to do? And they'll go, it's 4 weeks away. I don't want to think about it right now. Great. Go back next week. Coach, in 3 weeks, I don't want to think about it. Go back the week of on Monday. Coach, what do you want to do? Okay? But if you wait thinking they're going to come to you because they had the foresight to see, oh man, we lift on that day and we're going to play. Let me go find them and find out. That's not going to happen. And if the off chance it does happen, they're going to come to you flustered. You're going to get flustered. Now you're reactive and you can't have a professional conversation. Okay, so be proactive and get ahead of everything, and that will save you a lot of frustration. Am I doing the women thing too? Okay. This was the other debate we had, if we wanted to touch on being a woman, but now that we have some women in the audience, we thought we needed to at least talk about it, because we do get asked a lot of questions about being a female in the field, and can you make it, and why does everybody quit 4 years in? Well, clearly everybody doesn't quit 4 years in because we're still standing here. And I always say first to that is, I don't think just women quit 4 years in, okay? I think this profession is hard, and men quit too 4 years in. You just may not notice it because there's a lot more, okay? And so with that being said, it's still clearly a male-dominated profession. So when I started way back when, I knew it was a male-dominated profession, even more so then than it is now. But clearly, look around, it still is, okay? So you're a fool to think that it's not. We chose to join a male-dominated profession. I did that. So if I did that, and I know that going in, I can't walk around waiting to play the card of, oh, it's because I'm a girl, isn't it? No. It's not. I knew that. So you can't wait with this chip on your shoulder to play that card. It's because I'm a girl. We all know what we're getting into. The profession is hard. It's hard for everybody. Okay? It's not just women that leave early. Okay? A lot of young men do too. Okay? It's a great profession as a woman. Clearly you can have success as a woman. Okay? But be real careful as the young women walking around waiting, looking for that moment. You know, oh man, is it because I'm a woman I'm not going to be able to get that job? Should I get this job? You know, I don't know. You know, once you realize that, okay, it will be a lot of fun for you.
You know, I always phrase, and I mention it in interviews, mention it to my sport coaches. I think the biggest deal with being a woman here is that most female athletes coming from high school into college have had some form of male coach in their life. They've had a club coach, they've had a high school coach, whatever it is, most of them, I would say a pretty high percentage, have had a male coach. However, on the flip side, most males have never had a female coach. I mean, I would say maybe 10% have ever had a female coach in their career. So it's just different. But I don't think the challenge of me standing in front of baseball is any different than the former college offensive lineman who gets his first job and is assigned women's tennis. I think it's the exact same challenge to me.
Yeah, and I think you can clear that hurdle because in the big picture, the athlete truly doesn't care, especially not in this day and age. They really don't. They just want to get better. I have honestly been asked on several interviews, not just once, several. I get asked this question: so you're a woman? And I always say, yes, thank you for noticing. That's always my response. And they say, so how do you think you're going to respond? And they'll say a male team. And it's always a guy that asks me that question. And he always has a women's sport, so it's really weird to me. And I used to always answer with, well, you're a guy training whatever, how do they respond to you? And they always kind of get uncomfortable, and I never got that job. So I changed my answer. So I changed my answer to now, and this is what I honestly believe, is the athlete doesn't care. The athlete just wants to win. They just want to get better. Okay, so if I can help you get better, you don't care who I am, you just want to get better. So if we can show that they're getting better, they're going to come back and continue to want to work with us.
Exactly. I mean, I do think it is getting easier, you know, where you have generation now that, you know, their moms played sports. I mean, our generation, our moms couldn't play sports. Title IX did not exist. So we have athletes coming through, their sisters may be All-Americans. They may have a wide background. They may even actually do something crazy like see women's sports on TV. So it really is getting easier for us. In fact, this morning, you know, when we first started this conference, we always have this female strength coaches breakfast on Friday morning, which is a lot of fun. But the very first one, there were 10 of us. We knew each other pretty well. Now this morning, there were over 100 in that room. So that's really good progress.
Yeah, I think in closing, you have to remember through all this, there's going to be frustrations. Okay, we're going to have frustrations, but I think the businessman has frustrations. I think the banker has frustrations. I think every job has frustrations. Okay, it's how you handle the frustration that matters. So always take a deep breath. Don't let it ruin you. And when you do have that frustration and you fought the fight that you thought was worth winning, because we already said we're not going to be stubborn and just fight to prove that we're right. So maybe you went all in on something you truly believe in and it still didn't go your way. You have got to get over it. A lot of times we'll hold a grudge, okay, and you can't hold a grudge. Okay, it's not personal. It's a professional business decision, okay? And so you gotta move on. You gotta move on from that. I think I just stole your line.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the biggest things we have to do is we really have to close the book, close super training. I know that you have the perfect 3-week progression, 1-week deload, and you're ready to go. But close the book because things change. You have to adjust. Make those adjustments and realize that I think all of us got in here to have a positive influence on a young person's life. So always keep it about the student athlete. Show up every day and do your very best for that person right there, that student athlete. Because after all, it's about them. It is not about us. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.